Hello chess friends, this is Sir Glenn again for another chess video, and this is my first video installment on the topic complete preparation against London system. I'm aware that I have already created a video on this topic before, I think months before last year, but here I am again presenting the same topic to you, but this time I consider this installment or this video series more accurate and more complete. So hang on guys, and listen, and I hope this will certainly help you in your tournament games. So let's start. D4, knight f6, knight to f3, g6. Okay, so this particular preparation and video installment is for players who would prefer the Indian defenses against the London system, which is players who would prefer King's Indian defense or Ruinfield defense. Okay, so here I like the move order bishop f4 d6, since this gives black an option to capture the London bishop, which is the dark square bishop, after white has played e3. So knight to h5, bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, and then g5. A very useful maneuver here would be to play knight f to d2, opening the attack of the queen on d1 on black's knight on h5. Note that this attack or this trick will not work if white will retreat with knight g1, because after knight g1, let's say black plays knight f6, bishop g3, knight e4, and the bishop on g3 is still being exposed to capture by the knight on e4. So here the correct move is knight f to d2, but now after instead of playing knight f6, since the e4 square is covered, we will play knight g7, a very clever response, and after bishop g3, knight f5, which exposes the bishop g3 to a knight capture in g3. But we don't want to just capture it, since white would simply play pawn or h takes g3, but instead we would prefer after bishop d3 to play h5. So we would induce white into moving the h pawn first before we capture in g3. Let's say for instance white plays h4, knight takes bishop, pawn takes g3, and then g4. White's dark square is now weak, and after playing, let's say for instance bishop h6 or bishop g7 followed by c5, that would certainly be in black's favor. So here, instead of allowing the knight to capture the bishop on d3, white gives up the light square bishop, which is not actually better, but after h4 g4, I would consider black's 2 bishop as more potent than white's solid position. Let's say for instance white plays c3, bishop g7, e4, trying to create a strong center. Black will simply play bishop g6, and after, let's say for instance castle king side, black can begin to put pressure on white's dark squares by the move c5. And now let's say white plays d5 here, then after castle and pushing the pawn on f5 with the inclusion of the knight develop on d7. Let's try to play rook e1 here, knight d7, and then after a white move, let's say for instance a4, then f5 would certainly open the position and gives black's 2 bishop a good view on slicing over white's position, and I consider this position to be better for black. Let's go back a bit here. Now, instead of playing e3 early on, white has the option to play the prophylactic move h3, which in turn preserves white's bishop f4 bishop, or the London bishop as dubbed. We now switch to a different plan. Let's say for instance black plays bishop g7, e3, castle king side, bishop e2. Now some players would prefer to play bishop c4 here. Now if black would try to develop normally, white often gets a good attack here on this diagonal by means of, let's say for instance, battery, queen b3 battery, and then followed by knight g5 and castle long. That would provide white with a crispy tactical game. But here I would prefer a simple solution, d5, and after the bishop retreats, c5, c3, which is an automatic answer for London players who would prefer solid setups, knight c6, and then after, let's say, castle, black plays knight d7 followed by e5, which I believe would give him, if not an advantage, a very slightly better position because of his central control. I use this position a lot of times in tournament games, and this particular setup has given me victories after victories, so I would recommend this for you as well. So let's say, for instance, let's go back to the main line, which is bishop to e2. Where's my mouse here? Bishop e2. I now suggest you to play c5, and after c3, bishop e6, which is trying to prepare black's attack on the b2 pawn by means of queen b6. Now take note that if queen b6 is immediately played, white will answer the attack by means of queen b3, and this is a standard answer to such an attack, or an attempt to, trying to weaken white on the queen side. The capture queen takes queen, pawn takes queen is known to be favorable for white, or at least gives him a fighting chance, since the queens are exchanged and the pressure is lessened. Now, otherwise, bishop e6, queen takes queen, pawn takes b6 is also in black's favor because of the attack on the a file, and a subsequent attack of b5, b4, if black is successful, would give him an advantage. Let's say, for instance, in the position here, knight d5, bishop h2, and it's a simple development. Knight c6 would fail to c4, so let's say, for instance, black plays quite differently here. Knight c7, threatening to support the b5, b4 push, which I would consider black to have at least a good plan. And if b4 is realized here, he would have the advantage. Okay, so instead of going through all this fiasco, black should play bishop to e6 first, so as to prevent queen from reaching the e3 square. So after bishop e6, castle king side, and queen b6, white now has to defend the pawn on b2 by means of queen c1, which is a little better than queen c2, because queen c2 exposes herself to an attack, let's say, for instance, bishop f5 in the future, because after, let's say, knight c6, knight d2, rook ac8, bishop h2, or rook e1, takes, bishop f5, now bishop d3 will no longer work because of knight d4. So he would immediately return back to c1, which is considered unappealing. So after, let's say, queen c1, black continues knight c6, which is the standard plan, knight d2, rook ac8, rook e1, capture on b4, and then after knight d5, bishop h2, bishop h6, this is considered bishop f1, knight f4. This is considered black having the advantage, followed by, let's say, for instance, bishop f5 followed by knight d3, since this will grant being black the two bishops and a possibility to destroy white center by means of rook e8 and e5 in the future. Okay, So I think that's a clear opening system for you, or an antidote for players who are fanatic for London system. So if you have questions regarding these systems that I am recommending, you can simply email me, or you may leave some comments in this video, and I would answer them as soon as I can attend to them. Okay? Alright, so see you on my next installment, which is Black's answer to London system if you would prefer opening starting with d5, such as players who would prefer the Slav defense or the Queen's Gambit decline, or any other systems having d5 and the bishop not being developed on the g7 fianchetto, but on the just simply developing into d6, or perhaps prudently on d7. Okay, so thank you for listening, guys, and I hope you enjoyed my video. See you on my next installment.